What if one tiny machine, hidden underground, could destroy an entire military operation from the inside out? Not a bomb, not a missile, just a signal. A silent, invisible signal that scrambled everything and nearly cost lives in the most terrifying way possible. Stay with me, because this story is going to blow your mind. It was nighttime over the Persian Gulf. The sky was dark and the water below was black like ink. 3 massive American bomber planes called B-1B Lancers were flying fast and low toward a small but very important island. These planes are enormous, they are loud, they carry dozens of bombs, and on this night they had one job: hit the military targets on that island without touching the oil storage tanks sitting right next to them. Now here is why that matters. This island handled almost all of the oil that came out of Iran, 90% of it. If the oil burned, the whole world would feel it at the gas pump. Prices would go crazy, economies would shake. So the plan was careful and precise. Destroy the weapons, save the oil. Simple in theory, almost impossible in reality. The lead plane, called Packer 61, had a weapons officer inside whose entire job was to make sure the bombs landed exactly where they were supposed to land. And for the past hour, everything looked perfect. The bombs were being guided by GPS, the same technology your family uses to find directions on a road trip. The predicted landing spots were tight, accurate, almost perfect. Then something changed. The numbers on his screen started moving. Not a lot, just a little. 1 meter off, then 3, then 7, then 12. He tried resetting the system. Same result. 12 meters, and getting worse with every passing second. Now 12 meters might sound like nothing. On most targets, 12 meters is close enough, but not here. Not when a crude oil storage tank was sitting just 187 meters away from the missile bunker they needed to destroy. 12 meters in the wrong direction, and a 500-pound bomb punches through the wall of an oil tank instead of a weapons bunker, and then the oil burns, and the mission falls apart completely. The weapons officer pulled up his electronic warfare screen, and there it was, GPS jamming. Something on the northern shore of the island was blasting out a signal so loud and so powerful that it was drowning out the satellites trying to talk to the bombs. Think about it like this. Imagine you are trying to listen to your friend whisper directions to you from across the playground. Now imagine someone standing right next to you screaming as loud as they possibly can. You cannot hear the whisper anymore. That is exactly what was happening to those bombs. The satellites were still talking. The bombs just could not hear them over the noise. And it was getting stronger the closer the planes flew toward the island. 9 minutes until bomb release. That's all the time they had. The strike commander made his call immediately. 2 fighter jets called FA-18 Super Hornets were already flying nearby as escorts. They got the order: find the jammer, destroy it. Do it before the bombers arrive. The lead Hornet pilot rolled his jet in and dropped a small precision bomb called a GBU-39. It was a 258-pound weapon, laser-sharp, GPS-guided, designed for exactly this kind of precise job. The bomb tracked its coordinates faithfully, and faithfully missed by 15 meters. The jammer was destroying the very weapon being sent to destroy it. Think about that for a second. The thing protecting itself was using the exact same problem it was causing. It's like trying to cancel a subscription using the app that the subscription owns. You just go in circles. The pilot came back around for a second pass, lower this time. He dropped down to 12,000 feet and used a laser beam from his targeting pod to paint the building, instead of trusting the broken GPS signal. This time, the bomb followed the laser. Direct hit. The building collapsed. The jamming signal dropped by half, and then kept going. The jammer was not in the building, it was underneath it, in a hardened basement built specifically to survive a bomb hit. The pilot didn't carry a weapon heavy enough to punch through that basement. He needed something different, something he did not have. And right then, things got worse. The defensive warfare officer on one of the B-1 bombers cut across the radio with a report that made everyone's stomach drop. A search radar had just locked onto them. It matched the signature of something called the MRSAM. This was Iran's homemade surface-to-air missile system, built partly from old American parts that had been sold to Iran decades ago, and partly from whatever Iran could build on its own under years of heavy trade restrictions. Not the most advanced system in the world, but still more than capable of firing missiles that travel 3 times the speed of sound directly at an aircraft. And they now knew exactly where 3 massive B-1 bombers were flying. The B-1 is not a stealthy plane. It's big, it's fast, and it has a radar signature about the size of a minivan driving down the road with its headlights on full. 3 of them flying together is even harder to miss. They light up a radar screen like a bonfire in a dark field. 30 seconds later, the missile system switched from searching to targeting mode. That's the difference between someone watching you from across the street and someone raising a weapon and pointing it directly at your face. 40 miles to the west, an American electronic warfare plane called an EA-18G Growler was orbiting and waiting. The moment it detected the targeting radar, it fired back with its own jamming system, a device called the ALQ-249 pod. This thing floods the enemy radar frequency with so much electronic noise that the radar screen turns into complete static. Imagine trying to read a book while someone sprays a fire hose directly into your eyes. That's what the Growler did to the Iranian radar operator's screen. The missile targeting solution collapsed instantly, but the Iranian commander didn't panic. He reached for his backup without missing a single beat. His system had an infrared optical tracker. In simple terms, it was a camera, a very powerful camera that worked on heat instead of light. And here's the thing about cameras: you cannot jam a radar signal. You cannot blind something that is simply looking. The Persian Gulf sky that night was perfectly clear, unlimited visibility in every direction, and the B-1 bombers were running their engines at military power, meaning full throttle, 4 massive jet engines burning hot fuel and glowing against a cold upper atmosphere. From the ground, they looked like 4 lit cigarettes floating in a dark parking lot. The Iranian commander didn't need radar anymore. He just looked up.
Inside Packer 61, the weapons officer was doing something routine. He checked the assigned flight corridor for the Hornet escort jets. A specific lane 2 miles south of the bombers was reserved for the fighters. That gap existed so that nobody was directly below the bombs when they dropped. He checked the display. Clear. He checked again. Clear. He pressed the release. What he did not know was that the 2 Hornet pilots had drifted 2 miles north while trying to get a better angle on the jammer site. They were no longer in their lane. They were directly under the bomber formation, and they had no idea that the B-1 was 30 seconds from releasing 12 500-pound bombs above their heads. The weapons fell from the rotary launcher of Packer 61. 12 GBU-38 bombs, each weighing 500 pounds, dropped into the night sky and began steering toward their GPS coordinates. Degraded GPS. Compensated. Close enough for the targets. The fall line arced down through 15,000 feet, where nobody was flying. Then through 14,000 feet. Then through 13,000 feet. 3 seconds after release, the Link 16 data link system updated the weapons officer's screen. New position data. 2 blue triangles. Friendly aircraft. 12,000 feet. Directly beneath the bombs. The words that came out of his mouth were not calm. They were not polished. They were the words of someone watching weapons fall toward people on his own side and having only seconds to do something about it. Chester Flight, break south. Friendlies in the fall line. Break south now. The lead Hornet pilot did not stop to think about the words. He processed the tone of voice, the raw sound of a man watching bombs fall toward friendlies. He pulled 6 times the force of gravity and broke hard to the south. 12 500-pound bombs arced through the exact airspace those 2 jets had occupied 4 seconds earlier. 4 seconds. The lead Hornet pilot later said he felt the pressure change through his canopy as one of the bombs passed below him. 4 seconds separated a routine positioning mistake from a catastrophic friendly fire incident that would have killed 2 pilots and destroyed aircraft worth $70 million each. Both Hornets scattered 60 miles south. The suppression element was gone. No fighters overhead. The Iranian engineer sitting in that hardened basement with his jamming equipment had pulled the entire strike operation apart at the seams without firing a single bullet. Now it was the B-1 weapons officer's turn to make a decision. He had 2 problems. The missile battery was still active and targeting the bombers. The GPS was still half jammed and making every bomb less accurate. Both problems needed to be solved before the next bombers made their run, and he had one weapon that could handle both at the same time. He programmed 2 aim points, the missile launcher itself and the communications facility 400 meters to the north that intelligence believed was the real location of the jammer transmitter. Fix the surface-to-air missile threat and fix the GPS problem in the same 5-second window. Or fix neither. He squeezed the release. The aircraft lurched as the weapon dropped from the center line. It was a JASSM, a Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile. 2,200 pounds of cruise missile, but unlike a bomb, it does not fall, it flies, and it does not use GPS, it uses inertial guidance, meaning it knows where it is based on its own internal sensors, not satellites. Nothing for the island's defense systems to detect or interfere with. The missile dropped toward the water and leveled off at 50 feet above the wave tops. 50 feet. That is about the height of a 5-story building, except this missile was skimming at just under the speed of sound, threading between Iranian coastal surveillance stations, hugging the water the way a submarine hugs the ocean floor to stay invisible. 12 kilometers from the target, the infrared seeker switched on. The Iranian missile commander was up in his position scanning the sky through his optical tracker, looking for bombers at high altitude. He never looked behind him. He never looked down at the water. He never saw a missile sneaking in from the south at wave height, coming in fast and completely silent from his perspective. 3 seconds later, the seeker locked on to the thermal signature of the missile launcher. The warhead punched through the housing. 9 loaded missiles on the launcher erupted in a chain of explosions that lit up the entire northern slope of the island like a sports stadium turning its lights on all at once. American technology, originally sold to an ally, rebuilt under restrictions, destroyed by the engineers who designed the original weapon. The tax dollars had traveled a very strange and very complete circle. But 9 missiles worth of solid rocket propellant was now burning and rolling downhill toward the containment berm surrounding crude oil storage Cluster 4. The berm was a wall built to hold slow, heavy oil spills. It was designed for tanker leaks that pool and wait quietly for cleanup crews. Burning missile propellant is a completely different problem. It burns hotter, it moves faster, and it does not wait for anyone. If that burning propellant topped the berm, the oil would ignite, and if 30 million barrels of crude oil caught fire, all the precise, careful surgical strikes on that island would mean absolutely nothing, because the whole place would be burning. The GPS was still half jammed. The propellant was still burning toward the berm. 132 more bombs were still scheduled to fall on an island where anti-aircraft guns sat so close to oil tanks that they couldn't be bombed. Packer 62 rolled in at 2,229 hours. The bomb bay doors split open. Immediately, the radar on the nearest anti-aircraft gun battery locked on to the formation in under 3 seconds. And then something happened that was not in any briefing. The first bursts of anti-aircraft fire did not explode 1,000 feet below the planes, where area denial fire is supposed to go. They exploded at altitude, right where the planes were, close enough that the concussion punched through the flight controls. Orange warning lights strobed across the windscreen inside the cockpit.
The gunners were not firing blindly into the sky, hoping to get lucky. They were firing predicted trajectories based on precise tracking data. 6 minutes of careful optical tracking by the missile commander before his battery was destroyed. Altitude, heading, speed, formation spacing, all of it compressed into one encrypted radio burst and sent to 2 anti-aircraft batteries flanking the central oil storage farm. He knew he was about to die. He used his last minutes to make sure the gunners could finish what he started. The anti-aircraft guns protecting this island used twin 35mm barrels, firing 550 rounds per minute. Each individual shell is about the size of a large battery with an explosive charge. In its own, not devastating, but 550 of them per minute from 2 barrels creates a wall of shrapnel in the air. Anything flying through it gets shredded. And both batteries sat close enough to the oil storage tanks that bombing the guns risked the oil behind them. You cannot suppress what you cannot bomb. The pilot of Packer 62 holed his heading. His job during weapons release was to fly a perfectly straight line. No evasive maneuvering, no altitude changes, because any movement disrupts the computers calculating 12 separate bomb trajectories simultaneously. It's like trying to thread a needle while someone shakes the table underneath you, except the table is an aircraft and the shaking is 35mm shells exploding in the air around you. 18 seconds of straight and level flight through that.
Tracers bracketed Packer 62 for the entire 18-second release window, close enough to rattle the airframe, close enough to feel the shock waves through the metal. The weapons officer watched the release sequence counting down, bomb after bomb dropping into the night sky while explosions detonated in the air around the aircraft. Near misses, all of them, but the gunners were walking their fire closer with every correction, getting more accurate, getting closer, and the B-1 could not turn until the last bomb cleared the bay. 18 seconds of holding a perfectly straight course while someone below was methodically adjusting their aim toward your cockpit. The pilots later said it was the longest 18 seconds any of them had ever counted in their lives. 24 bombs away, bay doors closed. The pilot broke hard left and dropped 2,000 feet in a descending turn that pushed everyone in the aircraft hard into their seats. Below the formation, one anti-aircraft gunner near the tank farm kept firing into the sky. The electronic jamming from the Growler was probably blocking the radar guidance by now. Probably, but every tracer round climbing into the darkness was proof that the Iranian missile commander's final radio transmission was still doing damage long after the man himself was gone. The bombs from Packer 61 hit the Weston cruise missile bunker with 12-meter accuracy instead of the planned 5 meters. 11.5 meters off instead of 2.5. The roof collapsed. Secondary explosions stayed contained, but the margin of safety between the impact and the petrochemical terminal next door had shrunk from comfortable to the kind of number that keeps a weapons officer awake thinking on the flight home. On the targeting pod's infrared feed, the propellant fire from the hillside was still moving toward the containment berm, slowly, not breaching, but every bomb impact on the island was shaking the ground it sat on. The berm was holding, for now. Then the boats appeared. 2 Iranian patrol boats cleared the harbor breakwater at 35 knots, loaded with naval mines, running hard to the northeast toward the supertanker loading channel. If those mines reached the channel and were dropped in the water, no oil tanker could approach the island until minesweeper ships cleared every single meter of that channel. That would take weeks, maybe longer, and the entire purpose of preserving the oil infrastructure would stop mattering completely if nobody could safely reach it. The Hornet escort jets that should have been overhead were 60 miles south, scattered there by the emergency 4 minutes earlier when they nearly flew into their own side's bombs. But before the boats, there was one more target that could not wait, the mine storage bunker on the eastern shore. This bunker was packed floor to ceiling with naval mines, contact mines and rocket-propelled rising mines, each one carrying between 100 and 250 kilograms of explosive material.
Drop a 500-pound bomb through the roof of that bunker, and you do not just destroy the bunker, you set off everything inside it simultaneously. The primary blast radius would be 35 meters. The secondary explosions from the stored mines would extend that to over 300 meters. The nearest pipeline junction sat 280 meters away. The most obvious bomb was the one bomb absolutely nobody could use. The weapons officer went against every instinct and used the biggest bombs in the formation for the most delicate job. 2 GBU-31 bombs, the only 2,000-pounders the formation was carrying. Each one had a special penetrator warhead called a BL-109 with delayed fusing set at 25 milliseconds. The bomb punched through the roof of the bunker, drove down to floor level, and then detonated. The explosion collapsed the entire structure inward, burying every mine under hundreds of tons of concrete and rubble before a single one could cook off in a chain reaction. The 2,000-pound bomb was actually the gentle, careful option. The pipeline stayed intact. The mine bunker was sealed. The patrol boats were not. The Hornet pilots were already sprinting north, engines at full power, racing 60 miles across the Gulf. 60 miles at 550 knots is roughly 7 minutes of flying. 7 minutes where those 2 patrol boats ran northeast with nobody chasing them. The fighters arrived late. Late enough that one GPS jammer hidden in one hardened basement gave 2 patrol boats a 7-minute head start toward what could have been the most damaging naval mining operation in decades. The lead pilot put the harbor pier on his targeting pod. 5 of the original 7 patrol boats were still tied up at the docks. His small diameter bombs walked through them in 4 rapid releases, boats folding at the pilings like crushed aluminum cans. 5 boats destroyed in under a minute. The 2 that made it out were running hard. Catching them required descending to 12,000 feet for reliable infrared targeting on targets that small, which put both Hornet pilots directly inside the effective range of the anti-aircraft gun batteries. At 18,000 feet, the 35mm rounds barely reached. At 12,000 feet, the Hornets were textbook clean targets for guns that had already demonstrated they knew exactly how to lead a moving aircraft. He switched to a laser-guided bomb, GBU-54, 500 pounds with dual guidance. The laser from his targeting pod painted the hull of the patrol boat the way a flashlight beam follows something moving in the dark. Wherever the boat moved, the weapon would follow, but only as long as his hand held perfectly steady on the targeting control. A flinch from a close airburst, and the laser walks off the hull, and a 500-pound bomb splashes uselessly into the Gulf. At 12,000 feet, with anti-aircraft fire coming in every 3 seconds, the flinch opportunities were constant. A 35mm airburst detonated close enough to rattle the canopy frame. He held the laser. The patrol captain had turned his vessel head-on toward the approaching aircraft, a smart tactic that reduced his thermal signature from a broadside view down to 4 meters of boat bow, a smaller target, harder to track, but it also meant he had to hold a laser precisely on a 4-meter target bouncing through its own wake at 35 knots, while tracers from both sides arced past his canopy. The bomb followed the laser to the end. Impact tore the lead boat apart at full speed. His wingman was already on the second craft, which had broken west toward the shallow water near the island's edge. The wingman cut inside the turn at 11,000 feet, tracers arcing past his canopy. He put a laser-guided bomb into the stern of the second boat. It folded backward over its own wake. Packer 63 pushed over the island on the final bomb run, absorbing redistributed targets that had been added to its list mid-flight because of everything that unraveled in the past 20 minutes. The weapons officer had been reprogramming bomb coordinates while approaching the target at speed, adding aim points to a delivery sequence that was already completely full, all while anti-aircraft tracers stitched the sky around the aircraft. The gun crews had been firing for 20 straight minutes by this point. The barrels were heating up from sustained fire, and the heat was warping the tracer rounds into wavering, curving arcs that climbed past the aircraft against the black sky. The airport control tower came down first. 30 decades of helicopter coordination from its upper floor collapsed into its own foundation. The military district headquarters absorbed 2 bombs, and the second floor stopped existing. The barracks complex behind it came down next. Then the communications relay that had been transmitting updates to the patrol boats throughout the fight went quiet. On the targeting pod's final pass over the island, the propellant fire from the hillside had reached the base of the containment berm. Slowly, not breaching, but every bomb impact on the island was shaking the ground it sat on. The berm was holding, for now. Then the boats appeared. 2 Iranian patrol boats cleared the harbor breakwater at 35 knots, loaded with naval mines, running hard to the northeast toward the supertanker loading channel. If those mines reached the channel and were dropped in the water, no oil tanker could approach the island until minesweeper ships cleared every single meter of that channel. That would take weeks, maybe longer, and the entire purpose of preserving the oil infrastructure would stop mattering completely if nobody could safely reach it. The Hornet escort jets that should have been overhead were 60 miles south, scattered there by the emergency 4 minutes earlier when they nearly flew into their own side's bombs. But before the boats, there was one more target that could not wait, the mine storage bunker on the eastern shore. This bunker was packed floor to ceiling with naval mines, contact mines, and rocket-propelled rising mines, each one carrying between 100 and 250 kilograms of explosive material. Drop a 500-pound bomb through the roof of that bunker, and you do not just destroy the bunker, you set off everything inside it simultaneously. The primary blast radius would be 35 meters. The secondary explosions from the stored mines would extend that to over 300 meters. The nearest pipeline junction sat 280 meters away. The most obvious bomb was the one bomb absolutely nobody could use. The weapons officer went against every instinct and used the biggest bombs in the formation for the most delicate job. 2 GBU-31 bombs, the only 2,000-pounders the formation was carrying. Each one had a special penetrator warhead called a BL-109 with delayed fusing set at 25 milliseconds. The bomb punched through the roof of the bunker, drove down to floor level, and then detonated. The explosion collapsed